Hello there, and in today's video we are going to be renewing the brake fluid on the Micra. Now it's actually easier if you get the car jacked up, but you can do it as I'm doing here with the car on the ground and keeping the wheels on. So what we've just seen is we've just seen the rear of the brake drum, so the brake drum back plate, and you can see that on both sides you have a nipple which can be undone in order to bleed the brakes or renew the fluid, which is what we're doing in this case. The nipples themselves take an 8mm spanner, and it's best to drench the whole area in WD-40 or plus gas or something similar. Now, because I don't have any friends to help me, or friends, but that's another story, what I'm actually doing is using this Draper one-man bleed kit. Now, the way it works is there's actually a sort of some kind of ball valve in the, or sort of a ball bearing in the actual bottom of the pipe itself, which when you try to suck on it, actually stops fluid going back up the pipe, and consequently air going back up the pipe. So what this means is you can pump the brake pedal, and you can actually make sure that the only thing that goes back up there is going to be more brake fluid. So what you need to do is you actually fill the cup that you've got there with a bit of brake fluid, and take the cap off the brake master cylinder, and then pump the pedal. What I've actually tended to do is to actually pump the pedal around 10 times, and then obviously check the level in the brake master cylinder, and then pump the pedal another 10 times, just to sort of completely clear out the whole circuit. Now, a little later in the video I discuss what I actually do as regards where I start, but the basic rule, and you will need to consult your manufacturer's recommendations for this, is to start with the wheel that is furthest away from the master cylinder. In the case of the K11 Micra and the N16 Almera, the master cylinder on right-hand drive models is on the right-hand side of the vehicle. That is, as I am looking at the rear of the car, it's going to be on the right hand side looking forward from the rear of the car, or sat in the driver's seat, the right hand side sat in the driver's seat. Now what you can actually do is, once you've got the bleed nipples open, you can hand pump the pedal, and what I've actually done is I've pumped it approximately 20 times, or 20 to 30 times for each circuit, making sure that the brake master cylinder is topped up. So the last thing you want is to get air going into the brake master cylinder, as that just causes a whole world of pain and additional activities for bleeding. As you can see, fluid wise, I'm using this DOT4 synthetic brake and clutch fluid, which is actually the suitable fluid for the K11 Micra, or certainly my K11 Micra. Now what you can see here is you can actually see the one-man the one-man bleeding kit, and what I've done, as I said before, is I've actually filled it up just to cover the base of the actual tube that's in there. Just filled it up enough with brake fluid so that if anything is sucked back into it, it's going to be brake fluid rather than air. What you want to see is clear fluid coming out of the wheel cylinder in this case. And once you've obviously got clear fluid coming out that is free from air bubbles, you can tighten off that particular bleed nipple and move on to the next wheel. In this case, the next wheel is going to be the right hand side of the car, which we're going to be moving on to now. What I also did after bleeding this particular brake, or renewing the fluid on this particular side, is to spray the whole area liberally with brake cleaner, just to make sure that you get rid of any brake fluid. Remember that brake fluid is corrosive, and you don't want it anywhere near clothes, metalwork, paintwork, or especially alloy wheels, as it will eat into the delicate paint finish. What you can do, and what I did actually, was after completing all of this work, I actually washed the car. So gave the car a thorough clean, rinsed everything down with water, and that's enough actually to just get rid of everything that may have sort of collected any brake fluid, etc. So as you can see here, I'm just doing the second wheel. Again, this is at the back, And what I'm actually able to do is I'm actually able to get under the car, as I say, without having to have the car jacked up. It does actually make life easier if you got the car jacked up and you've got the rear wheels removed, but if you can't be bothered to do that, which I couldn't today, you can do it on this particular vehicle with the car on the ground, just shuffling around underneath it. So this one is done, and just need to nip up that 8mm bleed nipple. What it's also worth doing is periodically check your vessel that you're capturing the brake fluid in, just to make sure that it's not getting too full. Dispose of the brake fluid responsibly, and what I'm actually doing is I'm actually putting the brake fluid into the same containers that I take my oil down to the local dump in. Probably shouldn't do that, but it's getting rid of it in an environmentally conscious fashion, I guess. So moving on to the front, as we have done here, it's pretty much a repeat of what we did at the back, except at the front, for some reason, these calipers have an 11mm bleed nipple. Now, the calipers on this are actually fairly new, so I had some reconditioned ones fitted, so the factory ones may actually have a different size nut for the bleed nipple, so just something to bear in mind if you do have aftermarket ones on there. Obviously, same sort of principle here. What I did notice was actually when I was pumping the pedal, fluid was getting past the bleed nipple and actually pouring out over the caliper. So what I did to rectify that was I just tightened up the nipple a little bit more, and then reapplied the brakes another 10 to 20 times just to bleed through, because I did notice I was drawing some air bubbles back into the system. Tightening it actually sort of relieved that, alleviated and resolved that particular issue, and I was actually just drawing in brake fluid back into the system. So you've completed the brake fluid change on your K11 Micra, and I think this also applies to the N16 Almera, which shares a similar setup. And what I have done to get rid of any traces of brake fluid, as well as spraying the brake cleaner on the calipers, nipples and the back of the rear drum, I've also given the car a wash, which is something I would have been doing anyway, so there's no surprise there. So I'm going to take the car for a test drive, but you can actually tell immediately if there's going to be any problems. First off, does the pedal sink to the floor? No. Good. When you are cruising along slightly at this sort of speed, which is a smidge over 0, doesn't sink to the floor under braking. If we reverse, pulls up sharply. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and take a test drive. So we're doing just a little test drive, nothing too strenuous, but will involve a few roundabouts to obviously test our braking on, and a few sort of high speed runs, which will mean, well, a high-ish speed run up to 60, which will mean that we'll have to use the brakes in order to slow down. So with the brake fluid change, what we did was we started at the wheel that was furthest away from the brake fluid reservoir. Now, because this is a right-hand drive example, the brake fluid reservoir is on the right-hand side of the engine bay if you are sat in the driver's seat looking through the windscreen, so that would be my right. So the way that I did the brake fluid change was I started off with the rear left wheel, looking at the car from behind, looking at the rear window of the car, so the left wheel. Then once that had been flushed through, I then moved on to the right-hand rear wheel. Then once that one had been flushed through, I moved to the left-hand front wheel. And then once that one had been flushed through, I moved to the right-hand front wheel, which is the wheel that is technically closest to the master cylinder. Now incidentally there, I just braked for that roundabout, and the thing that you're looking for to make sure that no air has got into the system is that first off the brakes are progressive and sharp, and that the pedal does not sink to the floor or need pumping in order to maintain any kind of brake pressure. If that is the case, take the car immediately back to your workshop and re-bleed all of the brakes. So you want to be re-bleeding all of them until you get all air bubbles out of the actual brake lines. However, if a simple bleed does not resolve this particular issue, and I've had this before, the next thing you want to check, if you have rear wheel cylinders, if you've got rear drum brakes, you want to get the car up onto some axle stands, take off the rear drums and examine those rear cylinders. So we're just coming up again, braking, coming down from 40, not particularly heavy on the brake, but again pulled up smoothly, pedal isn't travelling to the floor, pedal has plenty of response. So once you have obviously removed the rear drums, which on the K11 Micra and the N16 Almera can be removed by taking off the rear wheel, releasing the handbrake, obviously making sure that the front wheels are chopped and that the car is supported on axle stands. You can, with the aid of the puller, if needs be, remove the rear drum itself, and that will give you a good look at the brake cylinder. And what you want wanting to look for on the brake cylinder is any moistness around the rubber seals on the cylinder, and any obvious fluid leaks or contamination of fluid on the pads. This would usually denote that you need new rear wheel cylinders. That is something that we can cover, but at the moment I don't need to replace mine, but I think there are other videos on YouTube which do cover the process. It's very similar to doing a brake bleed, except you're actually removing the rear cylinder, replacing the rear cylinder, and just coming up is a very nice Bentley. Looks like a turbo with a chrome radiator shell. Don't like the chrome radiator shell myself, but I do like the Bentley turbo. Very nice car. Anyway, so if you have the problem on the if your rear cylinders are fine, you might want to take a look at your front calipers. So the front calipers, there's obviously rubber seals in those. They're a little bit harder to sort of determine if there are any problems with those. What you can do is you can remove the caliper itself and actually have a look, open up the bleed nipple and see if you can push the piston back. If the piston is seized at all or requires extreme exertion to push it back, say with the use of a G-clamp and a lot of force, then pretty much your front caliper needs an overhaul. Cheapest way to actually replace is, to be honest with you, to do it on an exchange basis. So what I did was I approached my local friendly tyre place, G&H Tyres, Burnham-on-Sea, can highly recommend them, and they were able to do me a refurbished, remanufactured replacement in exchange for my old pair of calipers. And what I was actually able to do was to take the calipers with me, the new ones, replace them over the weekend and then drop them in the following Monday. So what would then happen is those calipers will be sent back, they'll be overhauled, and somebody else will have the pleasure of having your old calipers, which is quite good. It's a nice little way of recycling. So the metal bodies are not usually too corroded or have any sort of problems, and you can generally sort of rehome the cylinders where the actual brake pistons sit. So this test drive's not going as quickly as I expected, probably because we do still have a lot of holiday traffic here in Highbridge / Burnham-on-Sea. But as you can sort of tell, I'm not having any problems with the brakes. There's no brake fade, or well, I wouldn't be because I'm not exactly doing speeds high enough to incur or induce brake fade. But there's no pedal sinking to the floor. There's nothing really terrible to write home about. So that does sort of suggest that the job of changing the brake fluid has been a rousing success. And just had to take off a little bit quicker from the roundabout there, just to avoid some of the traffic. We're currently doing 40 miles an hour. One thing you will notice, if you haven't changed the brake fluid for a long time, you'll notice that the pedal is a lot sharper than it was previously. So you will actually sort of feel that there is a lot more feel in the brake pedal. When brake fluid obviously gets old, it's hygroscopic, so it absorbs moisture. And what tends to happen is the moisture lowers the boiling point of the brake fluid. It also makes the pedal feel mushier, not as direct. If you replace the brake fluid, and you haven't replaced it for a very long time, you will immediately notice the benefits, and it's one of the first, before sort of operating any brakes or anything like that, the first thing I would actually do is, before going to performance brakes, is actually replacing all of the flexible joints, so the flexible hose unions between the front calipers. If you have a car with rear calipers, the rear calipers and the main brake pipes. And also replacing the brake fluid for a good quality, in this case for the K11 and N16 Micra, a good quality .4 rated synthetic brake fluid. And you will notice immediately the benefits. Also making sure that your brake pads are up to scratch as well. Once those items are replaced, then you can start thinking about performance related items if you are going to be going down that route, because you have already made sure that the factory items are performing to their utmost optimum efficiency. So we're just coming up and braking gradually now to this roundabout. There is no, well, there won't be any fade, I'm not going farther, so it's going to be brake fade. There's no pedal sinkage to the floor. I can hold the pedal here whilst waiting for these cars, and hold the car on the pedal. No sinkage to the floor at all. And we'll just take off. And there we go. So, I would like to thank you all very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies.